answering them through the format of these meetings and future meetings. Another way that we have addressed lots of questions is through the parent and guardian question and answer document that is on our reopening page on our website. We did add, I believe it was 16 questions and answers yesterday to that document that came from our information session with parents on Monday. So we are frequently updating those, and I would just recommend that you view that document and perhaps your question will be answered there. Throughout the presentation and our discussion today, you are welcome to post your question to the chat. Our Director of Instructional Support Services, Karen Henner, will be monitoring that chat, and she will track those and then refer back to them at the end of this session. And then whatever we are unable to answer today, we will look into and then post to our Q&A document that I was speaking about before. Finally, we are going to record today's meeting, and we will post these meetings soon on our website as well. So with that, I'll again welcome you and thank you, and I'll turn things over to Mr. Becerra.
All right, thanks, Mr. Clancy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you could join us again today. We want to jump right into it, but just to reiterate a couple of things that Mr. Clancy touched on, just please keep in mind that one of the expectations when the requirement from the governor's office came out was that we were supposed to provide people with some basic overview, an overview of our plan and answer questions. So what we've tried to do with much of what we're going to be talking about today is incorporate a lot of the questions that we've already received, whether it's by phone, by email, and we've tried to incorporate those most frequently asked questions into the context of our presentation. Does it answer everybody's questions completely? Of course, that does not. There are still questions that need to be addressed. We will use some time as part of this presentation to take some live questions. And as Mr. Clancy said, we'll continue to update our frequently asked question feature on our website. So please continue to look at that on a regular basis. Some of your questions may need more specific interaction. If it's a particular issue with your child, that may be a conversation that's more appropriate for the building principal. Finally, would also want to alert people to the fact that Eric Feist, Director of Public Health, based on the feedback that we've received, Eric is going to help us clarify some of the questions surrounding things like contact tracing and quarantine requirements, those sorts of things. So that is woven into our presentation to you this afternoon. So with that, we will get into our presentation very briefly, because I know many of you are aware of this. At this point, everybody is pretty much aware that our student population has been divided into two primary cohorts, where everyone, K through 12, would have at least 2 days of in-person instruction. There are variations to that. Some students may be here for a third day on that Wednesday, depending on their particular needs, and after conversation with our principals and administrators. And in some cases, students may be here even more than those 3 days, depending on their particular needs. So one of the primary things that we focus on was having a level of flexibility. If there was a need to transition between a remote learning environment and what is currently our plan of a hybrid scenario, we needed to be able to move back and forth should regional circumstances or local circumstances dictate that. As we said, we already knew that flexibility as far as how students could attend would be important. I know some families have responded to us based on our numerous surveys out. Some have elected full remote learning. So the plan does have adequate flexibility, we think, to try to address all of the needs of our families. It was very important that we had a specific schedule. We knew that our students needed structure. Adults were telling us they needed structure. And so unlike what we were experiencing back in the spring when we had to move to this remote environment very quickly, our hybrid environment will have, whether students are in school or on the days that they're remote, will have a specific schedule that they will be following to provide that necessary structure. The final point is everything we're doing is guided by safety. There are no cutting corners to try to get more students in a room or more students on a bus. Everything that we do, the starting point is, are we properly following guidance from our local health departments, the State Department of Health, or the CDC? And I can't reiterate that point enough. We will be, throughout the presentation, referring to ways in which we're attending to those guidance documents throughout the presentation. So some of the most common questions we've received have to do with issues related to contact tracing or testing, quarantining. We know that that's received a lot of attention in the media the last few weeks after the governor said that at the center point of schools reopening plans, districts would have to talk about remote learning, process for testing, and contact tracing. So while we have Mr. Feist on the call with us, we'd like to take advantage of his expertise in wading through this a little more deeply because we have had so many questions related to this. So Eric, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
We can. So thank you again for being with us today. And again, we'd like to pick your brain a little bit more to address some of these common questions. One of them was, what happens if a student tests positive or if a staff member tests positive?
Right.
People are really interested in the different variations. We've said it depends, because I think that's the real answer. But maybe you could add a little clarity to what we mean when we say it depends.
Sure. I'll kind of walk you through the process of how this would unfold, and you'll see where the depends comes into play on this. First of all, just let everyone know that every test result, positive or negative, taken within Madison County, my office receives. So we know who's been tested and what their status is. We usually receive that information. Most likely we would receive that information before the school, unless the student or the staff member contacts the school once they get the results back. More than likely, we would get the result first. And when we get the test results, if we get a positive case either in a student or a staff member, we do launch an initial case investigation immediately. My staff will be contacting them directly and then asking them a whole series of questions. What symptoms, where were you, when were you here, who did you come in contact with, were you wearing masks at the time, etc. There's a variety of questions, and some questions are asked based on the answers as well. So we go through a thorough investigation to try to identify anyone this individual's come into contact with. In particular with the school districts, we then would contact the school districts and say, we have a student or a staff member, we need some confirmation, but also assistance in trying to help identify were there any other places this individual may have been in the school or anyone else they may have come into contact with, to really thoroughly do our investigation. So once we identify who's positive, we know who's positive. Once we identify who's been in contact, we would then notify those individuals through what we call contact tracing, you hear a lot about, where we contact them and indicate to them that they've been exposed to a positive individual and that they will need to be going into quarantine. So we place those individuals in isolation and quarantine. I will let you know that we do not, at the health department, release that information. We will release at a countywide level that we have new positives and maybe at the township level, but we do not release any information on the individual whatsoever. It's left up to the school's policy and how they would push that information out. So, but the health department, that would be our role in contact, at least in the contact tracing, if a person tested positive.
Okay. No, so sort of along the same lines, people have wondered, okay, what if there were, multiple cases, or what types of situations might precipitate a conversation about closing schools? We know the governor has set back some time ago some metrics that in which infection rates were to be used as a barometer, 7-day averages or 14-day averages, those sorts of things. But we also know that there may be circumstances where locally or regionally there may be some variances that would lead to us having to consider closure.
Right.
So talk about that, please.
Yes, as you mentioned, Governor Cuomo's office did give some kind of what I'll call the bookend metrics for opening and closing schools. The infection rate percentage had to be under 5% in order to open. And if it went over 9%, schools would have to close. So that's kind of like the extreme ends of this. We're currently at 0.8%, so we're well below the 5% to open. So that's not an issue. But what we've done also in Madison County is we've incorporated the Governor Cuomo's metrics, especially the 9%, the high end. But we've also developed metrics locally. We can look at percent infection within a township. So we can look in the township where Canastota School is, and we can identify if we see an increase in the number of people infected within the town, that community. We look at a variety of factors. We'll be looking at how many cases are in the school, how many cases are in the community, because a significant rise in the community, even though there may not be cases in the school, may warrant us to have the discussion whether or not it's still safe to keep the school open. Regardless, we look at a variety of factors, and we have a discussion. My office will be in contact with Superintendent Becerra's office, and we'll be looking at each situation specifically, and from there, a determination will need to be made whether or not the school is closed or not. And each school is a little different, and some schools will close the entire school. Some schools, because that's all they have is one school, some schools may be able to close a classroom or a wing. All that type of stuff will be worked out and determined through the course of this discussion. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to this. It's really going to be what the situation is, and look all these different factors that are going on simultaneously, where they are, and what that points us to do.
Okay, so it sounds like on the local level, those are just going to be ongoing discussions and back and forth. What information do you have? What information can the school provide? And then we try to make an informed decision.
Right. If I can just add real quickly to that one thing I've just remembered. For the last 10 years, the health department and the school districts have worked collaboratively. We, especially during flu season, we get weekly reports on influenza-like illnesses being reported to the nurses' offices. So we're basically implementing that existing structure. We actually have a call with the school nurses today, my department staff. So we'll be, as part of our monitoring of activities, we'll be monitoring any illnesses and stuff that are being reported to the nurse's office as well, hopefully to stay on top of and get ahead of anything should we start to see a trend or an increase. So we're doing that as well.
Okay. One other one that I wanted to make sure I asked, because again, I was asked by a number of people to clarify this and certainly get your perspective on it as well, is when somebody is presenting with symptoms, pre-diagnosis, but student, staff member, somebody has some of the symptoms that may be associated with COVID. So what is that process, or what should that process look like? Because I know it has to tie into, certainly our school nurses, our, local or the personal physicians would be involved. But can you talk a little bit more about what happens when that happens, and how might that impact a student's ability or staff members' ability to return to school.
Right. As you mentioned, the key starting point on that is going to be the nurse, and a key aspect of the nurse's work, and it will be really understanding and knowing the students in your school, because we do realize that there are some students and staff that may have underlying health conditions, allergies or asthma that may, each year at a certain time, you may, especially with allergies, you may start always waking up, sneezing, stuffy, runny nose, things like that, which are some of the symptoms that could be construed or on the COVID list. So having the nurse really understand and know the students, working with the parents to really understand any underlying health conditions the students have will be key in the first thing, of knowing that when they do arrive to the nurse's office, if they are showing symptoms, is this COVID or is this really just their allergies kicking up? So that's going to be a key thing through the school. The schools also have a medical director that they can consult, and I would expect them to do that to find out, again, the course of action to take. I guess you could explain that protocol in terms of dismissing the student or staff to go home, but then getting them back into school. There will be, again, we're going to rely heavily on that student or staff member's private care provider to really provide a diagnosis and understand, like I said, if they have underlying conditions and they take a look at them, is it COVID or is it just a common cold? Remember, we're going to be entering flu season here soon, so flu is going to be occurring simultaneously with this, and their symptoms are very similar. So we're going to rely heavily on the private care provider to help diagnose the child. And then there is guidance. Let me look at my guidance here. I don't have it memorized yet. And if there is a private care provider that's not available, our office will be available to work with the family or the student or staff member to guide them in that regard. There is criteria that the state and the state ed and state health department will have for allowing an individual to return to school. I don't have that information right in front of me, but if the doctor could say their primary care provider could say they can return. If they have symptoms that are similar, there may be a test required to make sure that they're negative for COVID. But we will be working closely. We can work closely with the school nurse and the primary care provider to guide them on that decisions.
So again, depending on the feedback from the local provider, it may or may not, it may require a test, it may not, if they're able to sufficiently identify what the issue is.
Right. The private provider is going to be key for those decisions. And like I said, my office will be there on a consultant basis with the provider. We can work with them to kind of walk through a variety of things to help make that decision.
And I want to reiterate, I think one of the points you made was if there was not a local or a already in place local provider, that you or your office could be a source of information. If people are looking for direction of how to get that or get in touch with somebody, you can help them with that.
Yeah. Have them contact our office. We'll help try to coordinate that, finding them a provider, maybe answering their questions, or even helping them find a place to get tested if necessary.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll come back. I know we're going to try to work our way through. I know those were a lot of the main questions we've been getting, but we will continue that conversation. We'll have some more information also in that we will have some additional sessions where we can talk to Eric and get feedback beyond just today's session. So more to come, but thank you for that. And I'm going to now ask Mr. Clancy to take us through some of the survey results and some of the key findings of that process that we've been going through in recent weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Pacetta. So as you all probably are aware, we've distributed 3 different surveys this summer, and they each had kind of a unique purpose, but all of them were our way of trying to collect some feedback from everyone, including parents and guardians. And so one of the surveys asked parents and guardians to talk a little bit about, what were the things that were most challenging for you when your children or child were learning from home this past spring. And the reason that we were asking those questions is because we wanted to use the feedback to help shape our plan moving forward. So I'm sharing this information with you today as really a summary. There was a lot of great feedback, but this is just a short summary of some of the most common challenges that parents and families experienced. So I'm sharing them with you, and I hope you'll also be able to see through our plan and through what we're sharing today that we've made an effort to address them as best we can. So some of the kind of more common things are things like, just as a parent, getting your child to do work. So very quickly, parents became teachers, and certainly can understand as a parent myself, it's not always easy to motivate your child to do schoolwork. So that was certainly acknowledged as a challenge. Mr. Becerra talked a little bit about schedule in one of the previous slides. That was a resounding, probably the biggest piece of feedback that we received from parents, from students, and from our staff members was just the need for a consistent schedule that everyone can follow. So not having one was challenging. We are presenting our plan with a consistent schedule moving forward. So hopefully that'll help that particular issue. Acknowledging that it's been a challenge for all of our parents and some of our staff members, just reconciling their own work schedule with their children's schoolwork. So, I work all day and then I'm going to come home and help my child with schoolwork. So we acknowledge that, and we're trying to be as supportive as we can. Some parents shared that it was, as the teacher in some cases, or as the primary supporter of instruction, just understanding what it is that they're supposed to be teaching their child was challenging. So again, trying to put some supports in place for parents for that particular item. Tracking due dates and what was due and when it was due, which kind of loops into the communication piece, being more consistent and really intentional about our communication so that parents aren't wondering, I'll do my best to stay on top of my child to make sure he's doing what he needs to do, but you got to help me know what I'm supposed to tell them. So again, communicating that clearly to parents or as best we can is another element of our plan. And then just making sure expectations across the district are more aligned so that parents kind of are able to support their children that way as well. So again, great pieces of feedback that we've been able to address directly, or at least try to address through our plan and through some of the conversations today. I'm going to turn things back to Mr. Becerra, and he's going to share with you just a few items about what learning is going to look like, how it's going to look a little different this year.
And we'll talk about this very quickly because we've hit on some of these already in the opening comments. But very important, that first point, that students will be following a specific schedule to provide the structure and order to the day that everybody, parents, students, staff, all recognize we needed. Attendance will be taken. Again, students are expected to be accountable and to be present and accounted for, whether they're certainly when they're here in school, but also when they're not in school. They still should be following that schedule. We still will be tracking, are they engaged when they're supposed to be engaged? One of the questions we dealt with a lot last year was about grading and assessment. And I think now we're in a much better position to address this issue, and that we've had some time to reflect on what worked, what didn't work at the end of the year. We feel that we have a much better plan in place to be able to revert to our normal grading and feedback practices. So students will be getting a grade in the traditional sense that they have prior to last spring shutdown. Very importantly, so one of the things that we've been dealing with is what are the expectations when students are learning remotely, whether fully remote or on the days that they're not in school in a hybrid situation. And so we are actively pulling together a summary document that outlines all of those expectations. what should the learning environment look like at home? What is the level of expectation for engagement? What should or shouldn't be happening? That's all important, because just because somebody isn't sitting in the classroom doesn't mean that we shouldn't have the necessary structure for quality learning, teaching and learning to happen. So look for the what we're calling a virtual code of conduct, a supplement to our traditional code. That's being worked on by a group of our staff members. This will all be distributed and will be explained prior to our students returning to school. And finally, lessons will be streamed. Being able to engage students in real time is a key component of our plan. So over the course of the coming weeks and certainly into the new year, we're going to be talking a lot about what that looks like, how streaming can be a powerful tool for us to connect with our students and to move our learning process forward, even when students aren't in front of us. So those are some things that look a little bit different than they did in the spring, and more to come on that. We wanted to give you, again, a sort of a quick summary of some of the highlights, and we tried of what our academic program looks like. And we broke it down in two categories, K-6 and 7-12. So I'm going to ask Mr. Faustino if he can take us through some of the highlights of the K-6 program.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rosetta. Thank you, Mr. Clancy. So for the group of people who are here, I'd like to give you a snapshot of what the K through 6 instructional model will look like for this year. In the K through 6, our concentration will be on the core subjects of math, ELA, and writing. And we will be integrating our social studies and science instruction with that writing piece. So we will be providing a comprehensive curriculum. It's just going to look and feel just a little bit different just because of the sake of time. We are going to be really purposeful and intentional about our subjects, and we're going to be very worried about our time as well, and to maximize the amount of time that we have with students in person and at home. Our class size will be reduced by half for in-person instruction, so we'll be following all the safety guidelines, social distancing within the classroom, because half of the class will be there. And those classrooms are presently being set up to meet those safety requirements. Students will follow a specific schedule, whether in person or remote. The feedback that was given to us is that it was not as solidified as it could have been, and to provide that structure. So whether the students are in person or at home, there will be a very specific schedule to follow. That Wednesday, if you are either in cohort 1 or cohort 2, Wednesday will be utilized for a continuum of services, including academic intervention services, students who are identified, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, and your tier 2 or your academic interventions will be delivered on that day as well. More of in a block scheduling, so they'll have more intensive services and support in terms of academics, as well as social and emotional learning. Remote or at-home academic engagement when not in school, there will be a set schedule, as it said previously. There'll be a set schedule that students will follow when they are at home. And then if you are a fully remote student, those students that are at home full-time, there will be a very specific schedule that will be followed that is student-friendly in terms of being on a screen time. We have set parameters that have been set for each grade level of how much screen time students can be on there. So we want to keep their needs in mind. There's an option as we get our base schedule, there's an option for a more increased in-person instruction once we have all of those numbers finalized, to make sure that we continue to create a safe environment and that students will be able to be socially distanced within the classroom and within the building. And then option for full remote instruction when necessary as well. Students that are at home or something should happen, we have a seamless curriculum that can be delivered either in person or at home. It will be not as much that 2-week distribution like we did in the spring last year. We have much more in place now that we were able to prepare for that. So there'll be a seamless seamless switching back and forth if that should happen to come about. So let me turn it over to Mr. Altabello and our 712 highlights.
Thank you, Mr. Faustino. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So one of the things that was important that has been discussed several times was this idea of trying to create some consistency and some normalcy in this very abnormal environment as we move into this new school year. So one of the things that we tried to do is we looked at a couple different options in regards to what our schedule would look like. And we landed on the importance of maintaining our 9-period per day schedule as much as possible so that we could have, again, some sort of normalcy where kids can, come to school. They'll know when they'll need to be in class if they are in fact remote. They'll know when their breaks will be, because if they have a study hall, they could either use that time to do some academic work, or they could use that time to take a break. They could take their breaks during their normal lunches. So we're trying to create as much normalcy as possible. Having said that, we are on an A-B schedule, which means we are going A-B, A-B, A-B every day, just like we would in a normal school year. Even on Wednesdays, when all students are remote, we are still including that into our schedule just to keep that pattern going. As has been noted, we are splitting each grade levels into cohorts. We have cohort 1, cohort 2. Cohort 1 will attend on Mondays and Thursdays. Cohort 2 will attend on Tuesdays and Fridays. As has been suggested, the Wednesdays is very much like Mr. Faustino had discussed, but for us, Wednesdays are going to look a little bit different in that we used to have what we call 10th period. 10th period was a remediation time and time for either teachers to connect with students or students to connect with teachers. And one of the things we've created for that Wednesday time is, again, to kind of keep some consistency and keep some normalcy. Kids will still be able to follow their Wednesday schedule, and a teacher can request a particular student during that particular period that that student would normally have that class. Vice versa, a student can say, "Hey, Mr. Altabello, I want to touch base with you on that Wednesday during our class time." And so the teacher can have some flexibility and some opportunities for some remediation, for additional supports. And that goes for all students, especially our students who have some special needs. So students will be 2 days in school each week, 2 days out of school each week. And then that Wednesday, we have primarily remote, but again, it's structured so that all students can touch base with their teachers. There is an option for increased in-person instructional days based on need, which that's part of that Wednesday piece. And of course, this allows us to go kind of virtual and kind of go back and forth into a virtual and or an in-person model very smoothly. As far as BOCES is concerned, we did get some information on BOCES is also going 2 days a week. The challenge with that is, unlike us, when we're going AB, they're going AA, BB. So that creates some challenges as far as transportation is concerned, but we are currently working that out. Students will be receiving, BOCES students will be receiving a letter today, it's being sent today, indicating what day they will have BOCES. So for example, if we have a cohort 1 student who attends in-person school here on Monday and Thursday, they will be going to BOCES, however, on Monday and Tuesday. So that creates some challenges on that Tuesday to get kids to school and then to BOCES. So as I had mentioned, we're working with transportation to kind of create that transportation schedule. Having said that, there are some opportunities for students to drive with the proper permissions. BOCES had indicated to me just today that they are working on updating their driving form, and then they will send it out to schools as soon as that is completed. One of the issues that we're going to have with that is that BOCES has limited parking spaces. So possibly not all students will receive a parking pass, essentially. So we'll have to work that out, and that'll be included in our transportation plan as it relates to BOCES. So that should be coming soon, hopefully within the next week. Thank you very much, everybody, again for attending. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Clancy.
Thanks, Mr. Altobello. We've received some questions about special ed services and accommodations and sort of what are those going to look like moving forward. So just a summary of that information. So our special education services that we provide in the district, which currently are integrated co-teaching and 15-1 special class, and the related services, so things like speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, those will continue to be provided. So when students are in school in person on those on their days that they're in school, those services will be provided face-to-face. If families have elected to have their children learn remotely, then that will also be provided similar to the way that it was in the spring through teletherapy. So those schedules will obviously be worked out as the school year gets underway and we're able to accommodate both of those groups. Similarly, the accommodations and modifications that are typically listed in an IEP or a 504 that are provided to students, those will continue to be provided. Again, when a student is in school face-to-face, those accommodations will be provided in the same way that they have been in the past. And for students who are learning remotely, we'll make sure that we can provide access to the curriculum along with those accommodations and modifications. Through another survey that was sent out recently, we did share with families that we wanted to give students with disabilities the opportunity to attend for additional learning days, and we did receive that feedback from families. And we are currently working through layers of that. So our scheduling and then the number of days that families requested, along with looking carefully at each of those students and their specific needs to try to accommodate that and provide those additional days to students. So we're hoping to be able to share that information with families soon, within the next week, so that you can plan accordingly, but we are continuing to work on that as well. I will now turn things over to Mr. Congdon, who's going to talk a little bit about athletics, clubs, and co-curriculars. Mr. Congdon.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. As many of you know, fall sports were supposed to start actually this Monday, August 24th. The new start date then was postponed until September 21st. We did get some notification yesterday that Governor Cuomo's office has set a ruling on fall sports could be turning in by the end of this week or early next week. So stay tuned on an update with fall sports there. Please know the athletic directors and leaders across the state, we recognize how important athletics is to students, but our safety of our student athletes is our biggest concern. If we cannot start fall sports on time, there has been talk about pushing all sports, so your fall, winter, and spring after January 1st. Again, but the primary focus for these decisions would be on a safe return for our student athletes. I understand and recognize that a lot of people have questions in terms of athletics. Please feel free to call or email me or put some questions down in our chat and I'll get back to you. In regards to our school clubs and extracurricular activities, we're going to revisit these possible opportunities once school starts. Some of the clubs that we've had in the past may be remote, so they'll look a little different, but student safety will be our focus to determine what we can and cannot offer. As I close out my slide, I want to remind everyone, hang in there. We're all in this together and we're dealing with change. Stay positive and always be Raider strong. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Panuccio with an update on nutrition.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Panuccio. I'm the Executive Director of Finance and Operations for the district. I just want everybody to know that our summer feeding program ends on August 31st. We will begin serving meals for free, reduced, and full pay students once the school year starts. So you can see on this slide, meals, they're going to be served in small group settings. The students will be socially distanced while they eat. Meals will be available for pickup for remote only students. So if you're doing your schoolwork, you can come down and pick up meals here. We'll have a window for you. Free, reduced, and full pay breakfast and lunch will be provided. Breakfast will be sent home. There's no breakfast that's going to be eaten at school. So I'll give you an example. If you are going to be here on the Thursday and you're not due back till Monday, you'll have the option to have breakfast take home with you for the few days that you're not here. When you're here, lunch will be provided for you. But that same process will happen for the days you're not here as breakfast. So when you leave, you'll be sent home with breakfast and lunches. Next slide, our Director of Transportation, Cindy Clark, put this together. However, she's at a supervisor meeting, so I'll do the slide for her. All seats in high contact areas are going to be cleaned after each bus run. They're sanitized with our BNC 15 sprayer daily, and once a week we will be sanitizing it with our Clorox 360 machine. Masks will be worn by all with one child per seat. So when you have one child per seat, that's 21 to a bus. Families are considered cohorts. They live together, so they will be able to sit together. Routes may look different due to splitting the student cohorts. So the times may change, stay tuned for that. We're putting the runs together. We are requesting one pickoff and drop off at the same location in order to make these runs more efficient to get your child here to and from home. No after school bus runs at this point. Things may change. We're just going to have the base schedule for now, so that could be altered at a later date. These are our safety protocols. I just wanted to make you aware we have a cleaning protocol video that is on our school website. We presented that last week, so if anyone wanted to go check it out there, feel free. Daily student and staff screening protocols for symptoms are going to happen. It's not going to happen at the school. It's going to start at home. We want to make sure that when people enter the building and enter the classrooms that they're already screened. Masks worn by students and staff in accordance with CDC and Department of Health guidelines when social distancing is not possible. Nurses are seeing clarification on acceptable face coverings. There's been some grumblings about which face coverings work and which don't. We're going to leave it up to the nurses to let us know, and we will let you know what is acceptable and not acceptable. Refusal to don a mask will be treated as a medical or disciplinary. You have to have a mask on. Maximum number of students in a classroom is going to be by the 6 or 12 foot standards based on what type of class it is. We're not going to reduce spacing any more than that. We want to make sure that we're not going to cram kids in a classroom. We're not going to not follow the rules. And I'll let our Director of Facilities take it over from here. He can explain a little bit more about the classrooms and the other safety things that are happening around the school. I'll transfer it over to Nick Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Panuccio. Hi, I'm Nick Campbell, Director of Facilities here at Canastota. The maximum number in our classrooms is dictated by the 6 foot mark, desk to desk, side to side, not in the center, not in the middle. So we're strictly sticking to that guideline. We do have extensive signage outlining safety requirements of social distancing, hand washing, face masks throughout the district in all buildings. Hand sanitize stations throughout the facilities, office areas, entering the building. Also, frequent hand washing areas is encouraged everywhere. Extra masks and gloves will be available throughout the district every day, and training for proper hygiene. All students and staffs will be a protocol throughout the day with all our staff. That is it for the facilities. And our cleaning protocol video is starting.
So we're not going to play that for folks today, but I'll just refer you to the website. This video that I have on the screen now is posted to our website and illustrates some of the things that Mr. Panuccio and Mr. Campbell were sharing with you today. So head to our website for some more information, and also for a link to our parent Q&A document, in addition to all of the reopening information that we've posted, including our full reopening plan, a 2-page summary, and information about testing, contact tracing, and remote learning. So lots of information there for you to review.
One thing we'd add too, we mentioned that we're going to continue to offer various videos that explain what we've been working on at school. As Mr. Clancy and Mr. Campbell noted, that video on cleaning protocols is already posted on the district website. Early next week, we'll be putting out our next video, which has to do with all of the distancing measures that are being taken into account in the district, the various signage, the distancing of desks. We want to show you actually what certain things look like, both in classrooms and hallways and various places that were around the buildings. So look for that next week. We'll continue to release those leading up to the first days of school. And we'll continue updating you even after the beginning of school with relevant information. This time, we've again tried to answer a lot of the questions in the context of our presentation that we have, but we have some time to try to answer some other questions that people might have. So, Mrs. Henner, do we have any questions from people?
Yeah, we have a few good questions. There's quite a few that kind of center around what the virtual or remote learning schedule is going to look like at the elementary grade level. More specifically at the primary grades, a lot of parents concerned about the need for their children logging in on at a specific time during a day and then needing assistance to be able to log on. So I don't know if Ms. Carnahan or Mr. Tauby, if you could speak to what your vision is or what your prediction is for what those schedules will look like.
Sure, so I'll start. I'm Rob Tauby, principal at Southside. And for grades 2 and grade 3, we're really looking at having that specific schedule every day. So we're really looking at a 9 to 12:30 kind of time slot where we know we're going to have certain times to address each subject. It's not going to necessarily be 3.5 hours of straight Google Meet, but so it's going to be broken down by subject area, and it's going to build in time for students to work on their own. That's going to be a reasonable task that's going to be assigned by one teacher.
Jenny Carnahan, principal at Peterborough Street here. We're looking to do something very similar at the lower elementary, but of course taking into account the age of the students and appropriate screen time. And we certainly do understand that there are conflicts with schedules and that the younger ones are going to need more assistance from adults at home during the times that we're asking them to be online live. And we will also be providing more of a blended learning opportunity. I'm anticipating us sending home, packets and supplemental materials so that there is hands-on learning, and those activities could certainly be done at any time that's convenient for families. But we are working on working out the kinks and trying to be understanding. But that face-to-face and engagement is going to be absolutely critical and needs to be part of the day, even for our youngest learners too. So we're working on a plan that's going to work for everyone.
Thank you. There's a lot of concerns with the primary grade levels as they're coming in now, especially with students who are going to be attending a daycare. So just know that, your building principals at each level are going to reach out and work with you and collaborate with you as this process moves forward. Another question came in regarding testing sites and their availability throughout the county. Mr. Feist, someone was looking to see if the county was going to be providing a list of COVID testing places.
Correct. I can answer that. Right now, testing, we do have one testing site, like open testing site in Madison County. It's the Well Now in Oneida. What we do ask people, we direct people to go through their private provider. Many of the providers in our county are associated with hospital systems, and these providers have been directing those individuals to the hospitals for testing. So we ask you to go through your provider to ensure testing. We are currently also working on bringing in more testing opportunities for residents of Madison County. We're in a discussion right now with Upstate Medical University and their laboratory and their mobile unit to possibly bring mobile units to our communities to provide additional testing opportunities. We continue to work on that, and we're trying to have discussions with Walmart as well as pharmacies and trying to see if they can get here locally. On our website, Madison County website, if you go there and you click at the top, you'll see a red button for the public health, the coronavirus. You click on that, you'll find a link to diagnostic and testing sites in our area, in our region, both within Madison County and nearby counties. So that'll also provide you an opportunity to find testing sites, and then there's a New York State hotline to call for testing sites as well.
Thank you. Have a couple more questions if I want to bring those up. One question regarding children, especially in kindergarten at the primary grade levels, if they are going to be supplied with Chromebooks for remote learning activities.
They are. We are anticipating being able to put Chromebooks in the hands of all of our kindergartners and all of our first graders, yes. So I believe that we'll be one-to-one with devices for everyone.
Great, thank you. That's how I understood it also. And another question here just came in at the end, wondering what the cleaning schedule is going to look like pertaining to how restrooms will be cleaned throughout the day and how desks and individual workstations will be cleaned throughout the day.
Yeah, so we're gonna have restrooms are gonna be cleaned daily throughout the day. There's in our classroom and high touch point areas, doorknobs, handrails, phones, and drinking fountains were gonna be daily touch point areas that we'll be cleaning throughout the day also.
I think also we wanted to address the fact that the workstations, for example, you know, between one student using that workstation and another student using that desk, for example, there's also going to be additional cleaning going on. Correct, Nick?
Yes, correct. That's how we were doing our schedule. Yes.
Sorry, excuse me as I'm scrolling through all these great questions. There was one I'm trying to find. Oh, if students are placed on quarantine, can they attend remote learning classes so they're not absent from the learning experiences?
I mean, we want our students to be as engaged as much as possible. So if they're feeling as if they're able to and they're not sick or presenting with those symptoms, obviously we would work with them and the families to make sure that they can plug into the remote learning environment. But certainly we don't want them to not have access to us. That's one of the great opportunities we have, I think, with our ability to plan for how we deal with remote situations. We do, as Ms. Carnahan pointed out, we have the ability to get a device in the hands of our students. We've been able to work through some of the access or internet issues with families on an individual basis to make sure that they're positioned as well as possible to continue to be engaged with school, even when they're not physically in the school.
Okay. Maybe another question here asking what the plan might be for phys ed classes.
Yeah, so that's a larger area that we have for students to fit in. We have luxury at the high school and middle school. We have two large gyms, the Laidlaw gyms, the Mayo gyms, where with a 12-foot distance, we can keep 56 students in there. So for those gyms, what we've done is there will be PE spots. Some of you may have had those when you're in elementary school, but there'll be spots. So the first period of the day, students will be in the first third of the gym. That spot won't get touched again. The next period, they'll be in the middle third, and then the third period, they'll be in the back third. This will allow us then to bring in our machines to clean the floors. It is a little bit more of an obstacle at Peterborough Street and South Side because their gyms are not as large. But we do plan on having a session to clean Peterborough Street and Southside gyms once throughout the day and always when the school day's over. So the larger gym space, a little easier it is to spread out. We'll also be utilizing the playroom gym. So all 5 of our gyms in the district will be cleaned at least once throughout the day and always at the end of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Congdon. A question regarding students who are placed in cohort 2. Because the first day of school is on a Thursday, how will they, when will they be getting their Chromebooks for pickup?
We're working on a pickup schedule right now with each of the school buildings. So that information will be shared by a school messenger as soon as we have that worked out.
There are so many questions coming in. I'm trying to keep track. There was one here that had mentioned something about the percentage of families that selected all remote learning versus hybrid learning. Oh, here it is. If half or more families are choosing all remote learning, will there be an opportunity for schools for hybrid to have more days at school?
That's, I can try to answer that. That's really predicated upon the ultimate numbers. And then we would have to really adjust for transportation and some other distancing type regulations. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, all the remote learners, there's this, now we can just bring all the other kids back. We would just have to really take a look at numbers, do some restructuring. Now that might be able to happen if people commit to remote learning, you know, by like second marking period or second semester, and we have so many remote learners that we can make some of those adjustments, we might be able to do that. But I don't think we could commit to doing that at this time, based on all the different factors of information that comes out periodically, you know, each day.
And if I could add, Mr. Altobello, in regards to 7 through 12, we're not close to that 50%. The majority of students and families want to be in person, so we're not close yet to that 50%.
Yeah, and that's changing on the daily. You know, we've had people going, you know, from remote to hybrid, from hybrid to remote, you know, and back and forth, you know, because, you know, people have their concerns and you know, their feelings on you know, what to do, and some people aren't sure. So, you know, people are changing, you know, often. And so we're just trying to adjust to all that, because we're really bound by numbers. That's what it comes down to. We're bound by numbers. We're bound by how many people can fit into each and every classroom. And if we can adjust those numbers in a way where we can bring the maximum number of people in, then, you know, obviously we'd want to do that.
Yeah, I think that's all accurate, what Mr. Altobello, Mr. Congdon just said. From the beginning, we said we needed to establish a base schedule. We knew we needed to be able to provide an opportunity for every student to be physically in school multiple days, because the overwhelming majority of our families have indicated that they would like their child to be in school when possible. Having said that, you know, just as we talked about what would extracurricular activities look like, we need to see how we do with the base, and then we can see where we can add certain other opportunities in. I think this is the same case. We need to make sure that everybody has a place in at least a couple of days who wants to be in school. If we can work with a family to provide additional in-person interaction and not cause a problem as far as, you know, with our distancing requirements, obviously we want to work with families to do that. The goal is not to limit the number of kids. You know, we want to do it safely, but if we can accommodate more based on some types of shifts as we move into the year, then that'll be something we look at as an administrative team throughout really this process. You know, are we offering the most opportunities we can for kids based on their needs, based on the feedback we get from parents? So it's a good question, and it's a complicated one because it'll take us a little bit of time to see how things sort out. That's sort of that next layer of conversation, but it is a possibility, I think, if we're able to identify areas where we can add opportunities for students.
And that's about it. There's a couple of other questions here that are very specific, kind of individualized questions that I've directed parents to contact specific supervisors regarding. And anything that we didn't get to, I will certainly update in the parent and community frequently asked questions document that is updated at least once a week or twice a week.
And I'd encourage everybody to continue to ask those questions. As Karen said, some are better answered, you know, if it's a very specific issue with your child. Please contact the building principals. They're a great source of an initial question. If you have questions of a bigger picture nature, as far as policy or procedure of the district, certainly keep asking us these questions. As we said, from the beginning, when we set up these meetings, this was never about just meeting a minimal standard that was imposed by the governor's office. This is the second of our 3 community and parent engagement sessions. Our final session of the initial round of sessions is today at 5:30. So anybody obviously is welcome to join it again. Obviously, some of the material that we're going over is repetitive. We're not doing that to annoy people, but we were obligated to provide a foundational overview of our plan along with answering questions. So hopefully people understand that we are trying to provide an overview and we're trying to answer a lot of the most frequent questions in the context of our presentation. Having said that, now that after our 5:30 session today, we'll have completed the mandatory engagement sessions. We wanted to go beyond that. We know that there are going to continue to be questions that families have. So we're going to announce now, and we'll continue to get this information out both in writing and through our videos, that next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we're going to be hosting another session. That session will be really geared towards answering questions, getting people on, allowing them to both put questions in writing that we can answer in real time. If people are willing or interested in it, they can also actually ask their question for themselves, and we can have those, that conversation. So other than any new information that would come out that we would provide updates on in the first couple of minutes, that session would be totally dedicated to dealing with questions that people have. So we hope that you continue to write down and think about your questions, and we hope that people join us for that session. We're fortunate that Eric Feist has once again agreed to join us at that session. He's been a terrific source of information for us over the last several months, and so we appreciate his continued assistance in helping us answer questions that we know are important to families. So those are that's sort of where we stand as far as our presentations. There'll probably be more sessions beyond that. We're going to continue to look at the types of responses we get and the requests we get from families, and we'll continue to add those sessions to the calendar. Also, as Mr. Clancy noted at the beginning of the session, we have a lot of questions regularly added to our question and answer document. It was, 14, 15, 16, I think, new questions just in the last day or so. So that's also a good source of information that you can refer to. So having said that, we appreciate everybody joining us. We hope that it's been helpful to hear from the different departments of our district. We appreciate everyone's continued support. We are in unprecedented times and face unprecedented challenges, but I think this community's up for it. I think this community wants to see their kids back in school. And I think we've been working hard over the summer to make sure that we have a plan that we feel good about, that takes necessary safety precautions in mind, but also moves our academic program forward, because we are a school district that has goals and priorities and high expectations. And so this is just maybe an obstacle, but an obstacle that we feel that we can address So we look forward to having a good year, even though it'll be a challenging year. We think we're up for the task. So hope to see you again at future sessions. Please continue to ask us questions, and enjoy the rest of your day. Maybe we'll see you some of you again later at 5:30. Thanks a lot.